Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. Michael Wan is here with his $1 cup of coffee. This is episode number 31 of Project Kids. I have no idea what we're going to talk about today. I don't think Michael does either. Good morning. It's Tuesday morning.
Good morning. It's Tuesday morning. Thank you for having me.
This is our show.
This is our show. But so I do a lot of these like shows with other people. Like I'm experienced with that. That's in my nervous system. I can't stand doing like the introduction, like what you just did, like for whatever, like most of this, like whole sort of like this conversation, whatever, like the podcast sort of thing is like, it really resonates with how I communicate. Like I love like just the talk and the banter, but the introduction, like I never want to do that. And I love that you always do that introduction. So that's why I say like, thank you for having me. Like it feels, like, I like to step into your house. Like that feels very comfortable for me.
So the intros, like when I first started doing shows, right? Like I spent more time worrying about the intro because in the beginning, it was always my first time talking to so-and-so person, right? So I would give them an intro that sort of gave them their credits or their bona fides or whatever. And sometimes like you should have heard the intro I did when we had Greg Carlwood on. I was like, okay, I'm gonna give him one of his own intros. It was pretty good. It was pretty good. I worked on it for a couple of days and got like, I found like as much as I could about his biography and made it all catchy and rhymey and all of that kind of stuff. And it was pretty good. Right. And every once in a while, there's somebody that has like some sort of humorous aspect about them that is fun for an intro. But over the years, I've kind of let a lot of the intro stuff mostly go and just done sort of like, whatever comes to mind at the moment with the niceties or whatnot. But yeah, the intro, some people like, some people's podcasts have like a whole music thing, or they have like, Randy always liked to make sort of interesting videos and music. And some of his were really good. Like some of them I really liked, and it didn't feel like the show was right if I didn't get to hear that opening music or see that weird thing on the screen or whatever. But I don't know. I just don't have a patience for a lot of like extra production-y stuff. So
that's the thing with what you and I do. Like you and just so everyone knows who's watching this, like Emily takes on at least 95% of the post-production of all of this. And I'm immensely grateful for it. And she also knows it was on my shoulders. It probably wouldn't happen. So but so like you and I, we're kind of like, we don't really, that isn't our favorite medium to work with, because you're right. Some people do that very well, and it feeds them. Like that's a place for them to show their creativity and their artistry. And so we don't do that, but you do a great job. But like some people, like that's part of the show, and I love that. And when I used to go on a lot of shows, I haven't been on many other shows other than the regular one, which I do with you and some other people for over the past 7 or 8 months, maybe even longer than that. But what I would love to do is when I go on a new show and there's like the pre-recording kind of banter.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what's going on in my mind. Like as soon as I get that hook, like they'll say something in that pre recording banter, I'm like, okay, we're on, the show begins. And like I could feel that switch happening into me, and I'm like, you guys better be recording, because this is it. And then they get to go and do the introduction afterwards. I think to me that's the most natural way for the like particularly like the first communication with a new person on.
You just see there was a feather just dropped down behind you. Remember last week there was a feather that came behind me. Some people did see it in the recording. There was just a feather back there that dropped out of the sky, a white feather.
You mean outside or in this room?
It looked like it was between where the door is open and then the actual outside. So like, right. But I don't see any more. It's like it was right behind you, almost in the exact same way that it was right behind me. Huh. Right. Laura used to have feathers dropping behind her on the video and whatnot. So that's interesting that you got one this week. I got it last week. Yeah, I agree with you. A lot of times the best stuff happens in the pre-show, right? So I know some people who like have just started they record from the moment the video goes on, right? Because they already know that. And sometimes I think I should do that as well. But yes, oftentimes in the pre-show, the show starts, and if you have to try and recapture it later, it's not quite the same.
You can't.
But I have started to like understand, for a long time, I didn't understand like why my parents put me into like Hollywood stuff when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
Like it seems weird. Like, okay, like I mean, it started when I was 2, right? They started taking me on auditions, and I was in a few things and whatnot. And I've heard various stories over the years as to why, but basically, someone had recommended that my dad do that, right? And I don't know how you can know it too, right? Like I'm supposing I guess, I had some charisma. I spoke reasonably clearly or something. I don't know what it was. But then even after I was done doing like the Hollywoody kind of stuff, because I was more into gymnastics, I would often get picked when there was going to be some gymnastics thing on TV or some exhibition at the Nissan convention or this or that or whatever. And I realized that if we lived in a normal world and not like a completely socially engineered, narrative controlled type of reality, you and I would both be the type of people that would have had like our own kind of talk show or something like that, right? Like we would have had a variety show or talk show, whether it be on a small local radio station or whether it be something bigger, but we would have been the kind of person that we just needed to show up and do the thing we do. We wouldn't have had to figure out all of these other parts and pieces of it, the pre-production, the post-production, the arranging stuff and whatnot. And so it is very, like, I get that now. Like, I don't think acting was ever my thing. I think that was not the right sort of vessel, although I took classes and things like that. But I think this sort of ability to sort of ad lib and improv and be able to talk for ever and ever about almost anything and with almost anyone and whatnot, right? Like, I think that is probably what that was, that I sort of showed that ability. And I'm sure that you did too, because when you talk about some of the things that you did with the little movie making and the awards you won and this, that, and the other thing, right? If we weren't living in the, I don't even know what to call the thing that we're living in or whatnot, it wouldn't be that people, if they're going to do this, have to figure out every aspect of it and control the entire, manage the entire process. So yes, that is the way that this goes. But I like doing the intros sometimes. I used to get really nervous when I first started, right? Because I was on the show with Randy and the guest, right? And some of these guests, they would come on and like, I had been fans of theirs for like years, right? And sometimes I would almost start to cry while I was reading my intro or saying my intro, because like it was, I can think of at least 3 or 4 times that I almost started
You're warming my heart right now.
Yeah. Right. And I don't know why I was crying. I don't know if it was like, just that I realized in that moment quite how much their work meant to me and that I was getting to share that with other people. I don't know. I'm not clear on what that was about. Right. Like because it's not, right. It's different than like when you win your first Oscar or your first US Open or whatever. But it was a moment, an interesting like turning point moment for me with some of these people. Right. And I think the last person that I had that tear up for the first time I introduced them, there may have been one after this, but was when the first time we had Chad Stumpke on, back on Off Planet, right? Because I remember sitting in my room that day. I remember that like finding his work, right? Like, I would go down these rabbit holes, and I'd be up for days and stuff like that. But I remember finding his work when I was trying to understand what I thought was happening at parties. Like I was thinking that like, there was some portal to other dimension kind of opening up, and I felt crazy saying that and thinking that. And then I found some video of him giving a talk somewhere where he was talking about the Detroit Music Festival and Hart Plaza and that happening. And so it was this place where my music world and my conspiracy like mind came together, and he was talking about it. And that was like many years before I ever met him or had him on the show. right? And so it was just that he wasn't the first person that it happened with. That's the last one I remember where I was like almost tearing up as I introduced. So anywho.
So you said we don't know what we're going to talk about, like as it always is, and so you just hit a couple things which were going through my mind in the lead up to sitting down here today. So I'm going to go and respond to that. But before I get there, I want to first comment on kind of like what you're saying. Like it's like what this is different than like performance acting, where like you go and you learn a script and you internalize a character and you know, there's that, and that's a skill set and that's a capability. And then what you're describing is like, you know, it's just generally been labeled as the gift of gab.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't just mean like, you know, there are a lot of people who just talk and talk and talk and talk, and certainly that could be
and I'm one of them.
That label could be put on me, but you don't want to listen to a friggin' word they're saying. Like you're like, okay, there's enough, like just stop it. And certainly I've probably been that person in the past, but the real difference, I think, is the ability not just to talk, but to have the link, the feedback loop, the communication. And that's the real kind of like natural ability, I guess. And like, you know, it's part of the human, it's part of like the continuum of what human beings, you know, of what we're capable of doing. Like some people can do this, some people can do that. And, you know, I would say, so that being said, I went and I got my dollar coffee today. All right?
Okay.
And so because it was like 9:15, I'm like, I'm gonna go get like I like had like a window of time, and it's like I didn't want to start something else to do, and I'm like, I'm gonna go and get my dollar coffee at the convenience store in Corryville, Pennsylvania. And it's fun for me. Like Corryville is literally a one-stop light town. Like that's a fair description of this town, Corryville. And that's exactly where this convenience store is. So I drive there. There's a lot of action. And I love like interacting with like all the farmers and all this sort of stuff. So I go there and like I put on my like I'm gonna meet with the farmer folks. And I like talk like the farmers and like, you know, and like I meet them on their value systems. And I'm aware of what I'm doing. Like I like this way that I'm meeting these different sort of people. And I'm able to very naturally like communicate in their language. And I, you know, I can do that in a lot of places. And I'm kind of laughing at myself. I'm like, yeah, that's something what you do, Mike. So I'm driving my truck back. I'm driving my truck back to Nome Countryside. And this is kind of funny. So in front of me there's an Amish buggy on the road. And there's Amish buggies all over the place around here. Like I live in a high concentration of Amish, and there's a variety of buggies, like the styles, like, and the one that was in front of me was an open top, like it wasn't covered and was almost more like a wagon. I'm sorry? A what?
Convertible, right? Like when you were a teenager, you wanted like a rabbit convertible or whatever, like the car that had
yes.
Convertible buggy. That's a trend.
Convertible. I kept them breaking up when you said that word. So exactly. So, and it was like turning left, and there were like, I don't know, like probably like 3 Amish women in there. I would say probably, if I were to guess, late teens to early 20s. And and so going back to what I was saying before, like like that's something which and I was thinking about, like, you know, how I like to communicate with people, and how it's something not only that I'm good at, but I like to do that. And I was thinking about that, like with all of the farmer rednecks up there. And I'm also aware that I really know how to talk to women. Like it's just something I've always known how to do, like both like in like friendship way and like flirtatious way and all these sort of ways. Like I'm just good at that. Like not all men can do that.
Michael was hitting on the Amish lady.
No, this is where it gets funny. So I've always known that. And I also know that like there are a lot of men who don't like are very uncomfortable around women. And they don't feel natural just communicating with them. And so I'm aware of that. And I'm also aware that there's like this kind of theme within, you know, I don't know if it's universally true, but it's certainly culturally true in certain cultures, of like men catcalling women. Like, you know, you think about like that sort of like construction worker and a woman walking down the street and all that sort of stuff. And And I never got that, because I've always thought, like, I know how to really speak to, like, if I wanted to go and make a connection, like, that's really easy for me, and I can do that. And that's almost like there's a game quality to that. But when I see, and I just never got it. And I always thought it was simple. I would think in my head, I was like, those guys got no game. But when I see these Amish women, there's this thing that comes over me, and I'm like, I want to catcall them. I've never felt that my entire life, but I want to roll down my window. Like, I don't even know what I want to say, but like this urge like boils up inside of me. Maybe it's because I don't know how to like communicate with them, but I'm laughing at myself. I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of new. I don't. Well, actually, that's not true. Sometimes what I do is I honk. Like, modern cars, I've noticed they don't have a good like a communication horn, like they're too aggressive. But because my truck is like 20 years old, it's got a really nice horn, like in the fact that you can say hi with the horn and it doesn't feel like you're being aggressive. Yeah. And so because of that, I definitely I honk. if I see a
when honk, when you don't know what to do, honk.
Well, so I'll drive along. This is like true in all of like in Lancaster. You'll see what's very common is the Amish women do the majority of the lawn mowing and the like the lawn trimming or the weed whacking. And so you'll see like a Amish woman in her Amish dress, barefoot, like pushing a lawnmower or like with a weed whacker. It's kind of like a funny thing. And whenever I see that, and I think it's a really cute Amish woman, that's when I honk. So that's when I do a lot of my honking. I think I'm the only one who's like, I'm laughing. I don't even know if they well, I don't know what's going on, but it tickles myself.
Well, so you like, okay, so there's a couple of things that come to mind here that I would like to talk about. And it also stimulated what I think I might like to make the larger portion of the conversation today. We'll just see how it goes, but it brought something to mind. So I'm curious about what the Amish courting rituals are, right? Are Amish, is it like arranged marriages? Is there like a pool that they're allowed to sort of select from? Like, I would be very curious. I'm well aware that they probably marry pretty young, right? And so I have a hard time believing that one in their mid-teens, right? Mid to late teens, which is, I think, when they really are, knowing exactly like, this is what I really like, right? Like, we have what we think we like when we're younger. And then when we get older, we recognize like the thing we actually like. So I'm curious if you know anything about Amish courting rituals, but I also bet that it may be different, but I think that the Amish people, maybe the girls, are probably for some reason mysteriously curious about you as well, because you kind of are like you don't come off as completely not Amish, right? We've talked about this before. Like, you're almost like the hipster version of Amish. Like, you're like a hybrid Amish of some sort. Like, you seem like the kind of like Amish meets like Williamsburg, Brooklyn, or something like that might be some of your dressing and sort of your like moving around style or whatnot. So I'm curious. I'm sure that they look at you and they're not quite sure what to make or how to act either, because you're not completely not them, but you're definitely not them, right? So,
right. So yeah. Those are two questions, and these are things I'm going to have fun talking about. So I'm going to answer the second one first. Like, as I indicated earlier, like I know that I'm a communicator. I know that I have the attributes where I can connect with people which are maybe from a different sort of like social circle than me. I've always been able to do that really well, and I like that. So I purposefully, whenever I love being a fish out of water, and I love to be able to go and to connect with whomever, whatever group I'm around. And so that's certainly true with my time here in Amish, so in the Amish world. And so I'm aware of that. And to your point, like, yeah, like particularly as I walk around the general area where I live, I walk a lot. And I know that like I'm being checked out mostly out of curiosity, like, what is this new person here? Because it's typically, you don't have like a lot of new people. And I carry myself in, as you said, like kind of like, it's kind of Amish, but it's kind of not. And then I think I've told you this story, how there's here in Nome countryside, like once a week, there is an Amish woman and her granddaughter. They come and they clean the house. The granddaughter's probably like late teens, and the grandmother's probably in her 60s or so. And the grandmother asked Mr. Rich, she made a request that I not be in the house when they clean. And we're all like, we're trying to figure out why. Like, why are they asking me not to be in the house? Like, when I was there, I'm just sitting on the porch and I was doing work. And so the only thing is that the only conclusion, like having talked to a whole bunch of people, is that she doesn't want her 16-year-old daughter in the same household as me. So, right. And that kind of tickled me. So that being said, I want to go and answer the first part of the question, which is the Amish courting ritual. And by no means am I an expert, but I witness it and I watch it. So I'll tell you what I've noticed and what I think is going on from my observation. So first off is, I think courting is a really big friggin' deal. I don't think they're arranged marriages, but I don't know. It may be like pseudo arranged in the fact that maybe families get like children together, like in social situations, to kind of see what happens. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it might be like a little bit controlled that way, but it's not as much as like what you would think of like in other cultures where the marriages are completely arranged. But that said, you often on Saturdays and Sundays, you see the courting happening. So you'll see like an Amish man is married because he has a beard. And if he doesn't have a beard, he's not married. So you know right away when you see a man and a woman in a buggy together and the man doesn't have a beard, you know it's a date.
Okay.
And I'm always paying attention. Like when I see that on the road, you see it all the time. Like on Saturdays and Sundays, like maybe 30 or 40 different times, you'll see like dressed really nicely. And there's always events. They go out late, like on the bridle path, which is the road which this house is off of. It's like a tertiary, like unpaved road, but it's a cut through. And I can hear buggies like 2 a.m. driving through. And it's often like young people. And they're often like, you'll see the men in their like best clothes. Like they'll have like a more colorful shirt, like a rich purple shirt on instead of the normal pale blue. I don't know if the color shirts have really anything to say, like have any meaning other than the fact that maybe they're like snazzy. And I'm always trying to get a sense of like, what does the comfort level look between the two? As like, sometimes you can see like there's a nice chemistry between the two. And then sometimes it looks really uncomfortable, like between them. And I always think that's interesting. But about 2 weeks ago, I was, I probably sleep half the nights here in the truck outside just because I like sleeping in the truck. And in the middle of the night, I could hear all of this, and I may have even told you this story. I could hear all of this commotion, like in the woods, but in the Nome countryside part, like the wooded area, and it's teenagers. And I thought they were just like regular, what we would call English teenagers who are out having a good time. And it got so loud, like it was
English is what the Amish refer to American people who are not Amish. They call them
anyone who's not Amish.
Right.
Anyone who's not Amish. Like you could be like ethnicity, like Filipino, and you're still English. Like,
okay,
there's no.
Anyone who's not Amish is English.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so I'm starting to hear this. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning. And I'm like, this is getting a little bit too loud. I'm like, I'm like, am I going to really have to go and ask these teenagers to like, I've become that man. I've become the man who's going to go and like, put it on 2 or 3 in the morning. It's like on our property. So anyway, I get out of the truck and I start walking in that direction. I could hear the voices are coming up. And it's 2 Amish couples, like definitely teenagers, and they sound really friggin' drunk. And they're just like, it literally, and they're speaking Pennsylvania Dutch. Like I can't understand the words they're using. And it's no different than any sort of like 17-year. In fact, now this is what I'm going to say. I have sons who are in high school right now. And I ask them questions a lot about like, the social, like what's social life like nowadays in this like smartphone post-COVID world. And my boys tell me, and I'm like comparing it to what I knew when I was in high school. And I'm like, that's just friggin' like, I feel like they're missing something which was so much fun for me. But these Amish kids are still living it. Like, I mean, I was like, that's what I remember high school being like. And so that would be my what I've seen in the courting process of Amish adolescents.
So, okay. So a couple of things that like jump up and strike me. And the first thing is I think they accurately identify people, right? So I've been involved in a ongoing series with Les Luthor and Nish. And Les Luthor lives in England, right? And he's very convinced. And I've thought this for a long time. It's come up in your work and my work. Actually, he said that's how he became interested in me and in us and started listening, was when we were talking about why does nobody ever talk about the Brits still controlling everything, right? Like everyone thinks it's Russia or it's America or it's China. And we're like, what about the fucking British Empire, dude? Like the X factor kind of thing that we've talked about a couple years ago. So he calls it the hidden hand, and he's like very sure that that's still what's happening. And I mostly agree with him, I think, right? But the Amish are like very, very clear that they are the only ones that have escaped the reach and the control and the social engineering and the financial dominance and this, that, and the other thing of the British Empire. Everyone else in the world has been colonized, and except for them. So everyone else is English and they're not, right? And my guess, and they say it so plainly, right? They don't make any differentiation between a Filipino person or a Mexican person or whatever, right? Everyone else who's not them is English. And I think that's probably more accurate than the bullshit that we do with all these like identities and sub-identities and all this.
Oh, I see where you're going with that. Right? Yes. I think that's a really interesting option.
Everyone else is under a specific kind. Now, not to say that they're not under their own unique kind of mind control, but it is definitely a different one than ours. Right. The rest of us are all, to varying degrees, at least touched, if not controlled completely, by the projects of the British Empire. Right.
Yeah, the Pilgrim Society stuff.
Exactly. The purpose, almost the entire purpose of their existence and way of life is to not be that, to avoid that. So everything that is not them is that. And that is their organizing principle, is to not be that. Right. And everything that we think of as core to Amish culture may not really be so much about what we think it is, like that there's some high religious or whatever. No, maybe these were just the tactics that had to be developed in order to prevent that. And so whatever stories people make up about why they're doing what they're doing just adds an extra layer of security to them, for them, and they don't really care, and that's fine. Right. And that all of it may not even be that they're anti-progress or technological evolution or da-da-da-da-da. They're just anti it being under the control of those people. And so whatever has to be done to be away from that, right, is what they're doing. And so of course they would have all the same, the kids would do the same shit that we do and blah, 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 blah. Right. So I thought that was interesting. And then you said another thing, and I'm trying to think of the other thing that you said. Oh, about your boys. And do the boys still go to the Waldorf school?
No. So their Waldorf school only went through 8th grade.
Okay. All right. So
and now they go to Catholic school.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
Very interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, it is weird the way that the kids socialize today and the things that they that are issues for them. Like, I hear about like these like teenage girls who like watch TikTok and now they have tics and they speak in foreign accents and weird shit like that. And it's like, what happened to good old fashioned like anorexia from looking at skinny models on the cover of Teen Vogue, right? Like
good old days
now. Right. But yes, there is, I mean, it's very, we know kids who like don't go to school because they stopped going to school during COVID, right? And they had been socially awkward before that, and they're more socially awkward now, and the decision has been made for them that it's better to not go because they feel uncomfortable around that, right? You know, and so it's very you know, if we who was it, like Alfred Huck, was it Aldous Huxley, or who was it, like, you know, that there's this intentional creation of like autistic type of kids, right?
Yeah,
Kids,
that would be Brave New World.
Brave New World, right? So like this inability to behave normal socially, and this compulsion towards some sort of highly refined one or two things that they happen to do incredibly well that might seem like useless to 99% of the people, but is actually crucial in carving out some sort of like neural pathway of the hive mind that the system can't seem to accomplish on their own. And so the development of these people who will obsessively do, and it might not even be a thing, that they may just think they're doing their, you know, recreational, whatever, but this constant reinforcement of a specific neural pathway as part of like the global brain or whatnot is accomplishing something, right? And so, you know, yeah, like I think that's interesting. I don't think there's any young teenagers who, after the isolation of the last 2 years, have thought, you know what, let's put down our computers, let's put down our phones, and let's just go play in the mud with each other, right? That's not happening. Whereas
I mean, your observations, and particularly the tie-in to Brave New World. So, if what I think you're referencing to is like in Brave New World, it was talking about how the like people would be. I think it was all like Greek letters, like alpha, beta, and delta, and there would be amount of oxygen which would be withheld in the incubator, which would then stunt like the mental capacity to ensure like, okay, this person's a delta, so they're only going to be right. This will excite them, but this person, like, you know, we raise them like a regular person, will have their full mental capacity, like whether that's allegory to like having 37 vaccines or like whatever, and like the COVID. So that makes so much sense to me. One of the things, but this is one of my observations, and my sons are, they're certainly not, they have a very they're gonna have a very unique sort of perspective in the fact that they've had me as their father, and they've had their mother as their mother, and they went to a Waldorf school. Now they're at a Catholic school, and they've got all these, like, you know, not the standard sort of experiences or mental programming which other children who are growing up during this time period have. So I recognize that. But what I've noticed from my sons, they love hearing about what it was like. And I guess this was probably true for me when I was that age, but maybe not to the full extent of what it was like when I was their age, or like even like 20 years earlier, because they recognize that just what you're saying, like this is what they're experiencing is different. Like there's a certain level where I think they like it because it's normal. You know, that's basically what Stockholm syndrome is it tells you how like you will normalize anything, even if you don't like it. And you, or even if it's not good for you, you'll learn to like it and want it. But then there's also this longing for something else, something a little bit more innocent, something a little bit more like easier to be human, or how we once were.
Yeah. I mean, I think even when we were kids, when we would watch movies that were maybe from the prior decade and saw how kids in high school looked and acted and what they did, it was like, it was very interesting, right? It was like very,
without a doubt.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole nature of, like, you know, Nick at Night and these things, and the reruns of older shows. I can remember being like in middle school, and I love to watch Leave It to Beaver. I used to watch Leave It to Beaver, My Three Sons. These are like shows of teenage boys from like the 50s. And I like to watch it just like as the comparison. And so maybe you're right. Maybe maybe this is like more universal as culture changes so much. So like, let's compare this to like, if you're brought up Amish, when you're like 12 years old as like a 2000 or 2022 Amish 12-year-old, your life isn't really that different from a 12-year-old Amish boy from like 1922, because you're still living the same way as your grandparents did. And so our culture has changed so quickly that, you know, there's this kind of longing to want to understand, like, it makes you appreciate what your experience is as a young person, but then also like realize how different it is from all of the previous generations.
Yeah. I had another thought that I meant to go back to about the Amish courting.
All
Right.
right.
So when we think about arranged marriages, right, we're thinking about like India or Saudi Arabia, right, where or something like that, where it's like, you know, it seems to have something to do with the finances, the business, maybe the genetics, religion, right, kind of thing. At least that's what it seems like to us on the outside. When I thought, I got this visual in my mind when I was thinking about Amish possibly arranged marriages, and what popped to my mind is like, maybe it's more like animal husbandry, right? And I'm not calling Amish people animals, but it's practical. Maybe they're looking, like when you're deciding which animals to make, you're looking for which animals are gonna, you know, produce the most amount of milk, or be able to do this or that, produce the best stock. Like, it's all just very practical. It isn't about like what the business of the father is, how much money they have, what's in the dowry. It's like literally what is going to cast forward the best genetics to provide what we need for time going forward, right? And maybe some of the Amish stuff is like that, like which pairing is going to produce the children that are the most hardy to work on the farm, or to be able to do this or that or the other thing, right? Like, who's going to be able to create the most children or the most grandchildren, so that we aren't in danger of, you know, right, that kind of thing. So I don't mean it in like a crass way, right? But there's probably a level of practicality to it that is different, or it is entirely possible that they're much more advanced in their like awareness of how genetics works on almost an algorithmic level, right? And the answer is obvious. They don't even have to make it sort of like arranged. It just happens naturally because they haven't been confused by so many of the things that the English have confused the rest of the world with, or whatever, right? So those things sort of pop to mind. Like, they may have some very advanced knowledge that they're protecting about how to, and this, I guess, I'm starting to understand more and more now, you know, is a legitimate form of time travel, right? How do you make sure information is carried from here to there, right? How do you make sure that ideas or genetics or whatever it is gets from this place to another place, you know, far in what we think of as the future, or another space or time or whatever. And that they have figured out how to do that without all the nonsense that like Western culture has decided needs to be done with CRISPR and this and that and the other, you know, crazy shit like that, right? And that they're really guarding their knowledge, and that the decisions are made from that space, right? This person carries this information that we want to make sure goes this far into the future, and what combination can propel that to happen in the best way, just like putting together a fucking football team to get the ball across the field fastest, or win the game.
I've thought, I mean, before, like, you know, living in this Amish paradise, like, I've thought a lot about, or like kind of pondered upon the idea of arranged marriages, from a like a very practical sort of like way, like, you know, but looking at it from everything, like what you're saying, like, you know, families wanting to have like maybe like a business or political sort of like or truce, you know, like when we go and we put them together, we know that these families are going to be connected to maybe something a little bit less strategic that way. I think it deals with all of these things. So like there's that, but then I think that, you know, as someone, the traditional matchmaker who recognizes qualities within human beings to be like, wow, that they would work well together and we want them to be happy. Like, and then coupled with what you're saying also is like more of the practical of like of what would be good for the lifestyle of just like the regular person. I think all of those things probably come into play. And what I think, what I've always thought about, because, arranged marriages in our culture and the way we were raised, like it's got a real negative connotation in particular, and understandably so. Like you got like a 40-year-old man who's like arranged to marry like a 6-year-old girl. Like, yeah, I get it. Like that's like that's probably not the greatest sort of thing. But there is, assuming that that's not the scenario, like, like an 18-year-old or an 18-year-old or what have you, like that sort of experience of coming at the relationship where you're like, well, this is who I'm going to be with the rest of my life. And how do I find this, whether you want to use the word love or compatibility or what have you, like, okay, how do I make this work? What can I see in this person? You see them from that level, which seems to be so opposite of where we are now, which is like, let me go and see all of the things that this person does wrong. And so I can like, oh yeah, this isn't working. And that seems very, very like anti-human experience. Like that doesn't work. People aren't happy that way. So I think there's a real sort of ancient, I don't know, like old-fashioned human way technology of maybe the coupling process, which that's kind of what we're talking about.
So, okay, a couple things popped to mind. So something about Amish, and then something about the way dating is now, okay, for most people in the public. So remember maybe months back or weeks back, we talked about like Amish moon rituals and like what are some of their esoteric stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what if they have their own particular kind of sex magic, and that when they have sex, they are literally casting forward the sperm, the egg, the whatever that will become these people that will know to come together to do this thing, right? Like, what if they're really good at sort of projecting, offspring with intent, instead of it being just like, oh, some like spontaneous magical union. Maybe what if they have learned to literally control the direction and the destination of their sexual matter through specific practices, right? Like, and that they're really, really advanced. Like, we need fucking CRISPR to be like, I want a blonde, blue-eyed baby that doesn't have Down syndrome, that is going to be great at football. What if they know some specific, ancient
moonchild ritual?
Right, there you go, moonchild ritual. But like, what if it's something super advanced that we in the Western world are just like would be baffled by, because we're thinking we need machines and all this kind of crap to do, whatnot, right?
I still think moonchild ritual like that, like, that's got the Aleister Crowley sort of connotation, but it's like what you're saying. Like, I think I don't know that for certain, but I think that's a very logical hypothesis to make. What I do know is I knew a woman, an English woman, who worked extensively with here, you want to say it or do you want to write it down? Something just came in your head.
What if what if sperm or like sexual creation? I mean, I know for sure it is, but in the way that we have different than in the way we thought about it. Like, what if that's the most programmable matter there is? We talk about like sugar, dark matter, certain, things being able to hold information. What if that is like the original programmable matter, or the original sort of like computer chip that you can put anything on, and when you're getting ready to have sex, when you're in it, you say the certain things, you do the certain things, you make sure that you get everything there. You don't leave anything to chance, or the things that you leave to chance, even those are done with some sort of intention, because there does need to be some sort of spark of something unique and whatever, right? But what if that is like what if that's what sex?
So okay, so all right, so I think that makes such logical sense that like the nature of sperm to be like much more than what we think, and then like if you know how to like program it, so that like as a general idea, like I'm like, yeah, that sounds very could be an accurate way of describing how this realm works. But I want to go and throw this into that because, and I think it has a very ritualistic and mystical sort of aspect. So I've mentioned this many times in the past, and I didn't mention it when you were talking about it a little bit earlier, but about the Amish and how they're like this holdover and separate from the English. But the Amish are, to me, like they're much more similar. I see them in the Hasidic Jews as, they're the same. Like you could see where they're different, but they're so similar in terms of their lifestyle. The details are different, but so much is similar. So that being said, like, isn't that like part of like the Hasidic sex ritual is like the sheet and the hole and like all of that? And I've never really like I've wondered that. I'm like, well, how does that come about? Like, what is actually happening? Why would a culture of people say like this is the way that we're going to go and have the man and the woman and the connected and so. Going to your point, though, with the playing with hypothesis of now Amish sex magic, like what is that? Is that part of it? Is that seeing the similarity between the Hasidics and the Amish, and then being able to think like, well, they did this, maybe the other ones do, or so forth. Like, is that part of like that hole in the sheet is a ritual sort of like crossing the dimension? Like, I don't
penetrating
know,
the membrane between dimensions or
whatever.
Like it's a white sheet of paper and the hole is like where the pen goes to start writing the story, or is it like on a magic trick when you pull the sheet off the thing and there's
whatever it may be, whatever, like, is there something more to it? Because this is what I do know about Amish magic. And it's it's funny, I'm like, quick pause. So I've got the door open, and in the background, like not that far away, there's a children's program which is occurring. Like children come here, and Mr. Rich's son like leads these children's programs, like 6-8-year-old children, no, probably even younger than that, the program. And I'm just screaming like sperm and sex magic. Like, I don't think that's really good for business here, but anyway, within the realm of Amish magic, I knew this woman, and she was an herbalist, and she worked a lot within the Amish culture here in Pennsylvania, and she told me how she was invited into the powwow magic, which is almost unheard of. And she said the reason why is because who was kind of like her, like more of like an older man who she was working with in a professional, like growing herbs sort of way. And she shared with him a dream she had. And that dream she had was what is looked for within the Amish magic. Like when someone has that and they say like, I had this dream, they're like, okay, well then you've been contacted from the other side. So now we're going to go through this process of like inducting you and initiating you into this part of the world, of our culture. So where I'm going with all of this is like, well, if that is true, if I've heard that occurs, like, yeah, like where does the magical ritual aspect of life and creation, does it end there, or does it spill over into all parts of growing and creation? And it would make sense that it would.
So that's interesting what you said based on like this. I'm not going to talk about it right now, but this interesting movie that Laura and I watched last night that we found through a kind of a fascinating series of events, but also Howdy and I are getting ready to do a show that is sort of a little bit about Dark City, but then also about this thing he talked about a few months back about this gentleman who was in prison who slept 12 hours a day and would go to like another reality when he was sleeping, right? And this idea that things that when a person has a dream, right? That's the sort of tap, that's the calling card that, okay, that they're ready for this next sort of thing, so that there's like this other reality that we are in touch with during the night or when we are sleeping that informs what we are ready for in what we think of as the main or the primary reality, and that being very interesting. So then what exactly is that? Like, are we during the night, do we have a whole other life where we are also having experiences, where we are taking lessons, where we are learning things, and we're taught to think of this as just like, some like weird imaginal story we're treated to at night while we're sleeping, when really it's much more meaningful. And the things that we do, the things that happen to us in our waking life, are much more dependent on what's happening there than we're, led to believe, right? So that's an interesting anecdote for that idea, and the topic that I'm going to talk about a little bit with Howdy. The other thing I wanted to say is we're under the impression that we don't have arranged marriages now, unless you're, like we said, like, living in the Emirates, or you're from a super wealthy elite family that is trying to either maintain a bloodline or maintain a bank account or something like that. But if you really look what goes on with online dating, I can't think of anything that is a higher indication of an arranged marriage, but it's it's an AI or an algorithm arrangement. And I think about, I've never really done much online dating. Like, I tinkered around like at one point, right? And I don't know if you're familiar with this site called OK Cupid.
I've never done one.
So it's not like going on like eHarmony or like matchmaking. The questions are fun, but these questions glean a ton of information.
I would love, like, as someone that like understanding what those algorithms would be in the questions, that is, I would love to see that. So what sort of questions would they ask?
So this was a long time ago now. And when I was doing it was like when I was on drugs, and I'd be up for days and days. And there would come a certain point in my trips, because the trips are kind of like shamanic ceremony. Like if you're up for a couple of days, like day 1 is like this, day 2 is like this, day 3 is like this. So there would always come a point where I became very humored by, this was like my activity I do at this time. And these questions were like, like funny, weird, but these are
Give me one.
I can't think of it. It was so long ago, but it was actually, they're the kind of questions you and I ask each other here. They were perfect sort of like synchro mystic. Like, I'm going to ask you a question about pop culture that is going to give me like the deepest information, like period, about your psyche and like how you really think and feel about things. But it's going to be humorous. It's going to sound like you're talking about yelling Amish sex magic when there's children having a program, right? Like, it's going to be all like, it's going to have this whole feel to it that is like, well, this is just shits and giggles, right? So, but I answered tons of these questions. Like, I'm sure I gave like, the system tons of information about me. Now, it was in a different mind space, but it was fun. Like, I think I liked answering the questions more than I liked looking at the people or whatever. Right. But I only ever met, I think I got together with like a couple people, but like only maybe 1 or 2 with the idea so much that, oh, this is like a date. Like, I actually, the most interesting person I met on there was someone who, like, it was like we remained friends for like a little bit, right? And so this chick, there was something in her handle that was like implying that she like worked for the CIA, and she was, it was funny to me, right? So she liked a lot of the same kind of music and stuff that I did. She went to parties around in LA and whatnot. And we got together a couple of times. We talked on the phone a few times. I went to this festival in La Jolla that was on an Indian reservation, where I had like a really interesting metaphysical experience that is like one of the things I've talked about many times over the years, right? And the metaphysical experience really actually involved her. And I ended up wearing this pair of gloves that like were part of my magical experience. And it turned out the gloves had belonged to her grandma. And it was weird. Like, I didn't know that till after, but my experience, like, it was like her grandmother was with me. So it was almost like there was some connection that needed to be made, whether this was coming from the natural universe or the intelligence agency or whatever, needing to make this connection that was going to unlock a different level of my ability to unravel information and make connections. And that was a really pivotal, meaningful moment for me, right? That in terms of how I see things and how I think about things. And I tell some of the stories from that occasion to this day, right? And it was at a very pivotal time in my life. It was when I had just like changed my diet, and I had met Anne Baroque, and I was in something, you know, I was in the beginning process of my big transformation, right? And I think I saw her one time after, so I'd gone there with her and her sister's boyfriend, and we, you know, just went up there overnight and came back. I think I saw her one time after that, maybe twice, yeah, maybe once or twice after that. And, you know, then a few messages on Facebook for a while after that. But, I mean, people go on lots of dates with people that they meet in online dating things. And I don't know how many ongoing relationships they end up in. But what is the thing that's happening to the people who meet together? What swapping of information or energy or like connective, like some sort of spark comes because of the connection of these two people, whether it actually be a physical meeting or just, you know, the way some information is exchanged through the questions and answers that this thing is doing. This is arranging a lot of stuff, right? And I think that these algorithms are probably better predictors of what this connection will be than what we think of as an old-fashioned matchmaker. Now, maybe it's missing some of the intuition and the chutzpah and the love. You know, you think about like an old school matchmaker or whatever. But if the endpoint is that a certain sharing of something needs to happen, as opposed to these people need to live together in happiness with children and family forever, like these algorithms of these online dating sites and what they're doing are arranging connections in a way that is serving what?
Yeah. Are you asking me serving what, or are you just saying that as a like?
I'm just putting this on.
Yeah, yeah. Like as you're, I mean, that when you say that, like, bring that back to what you mentioned a little earlier of the Brave New World concept of right. Like the, but this is the same sort of idea of like the total controlling of, if everyone utilizes, you know, this box, this internet as their primary interface with other human beings, well then, you know, you could just through the concept of shadow banning, like, you know, you can completely between that and algorithms, you can completely control who is going to interact and how, you know, it's like drip, 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 like, you know, in someone's like recommended, whatever friends list. It's just a matter of time before that connection could be manipulated to happen for the means of what you're suggesting.
This reminds me of, and I don't know if I've ever told you this before, I've talked about it before. Like I met this guy at a party one time, right? Who I was dancing and he just came right over to me and was like, "You, I want to talk to you." And he looked like a werewolf. He had like long hair, like on this part of his face, right? It was weird to look at him. I'm like fucking talking to a wolf. He was really interesting. We stood outside and we talked for a long time. And the conversation actually led me to a lot of clarity about myself on a certain level. But one of the things that I noticed in the conversation was that all the things that were like pop culture factors for me, they were for him too, but they were something else. Like it wasn't like Alex Jones was not a conspiracy talk show host or whatever. It was like there was a famous Alex Jones for some other reason. And this like cultural phenomenon, like there was the same name for it, but it meant something else. The only topic that was the same in whatever reality he was from and the same reality I'm from was the idea of climate change. That seemed to have penetrated both layers of reality. But everything that I brought up, he knew what it was, but he thought it was something completely different, not even anything related to the thing that I was talking about. But it was a thing in his reality too, right? I never saw him again at another party, right? And he was, I would not miss him if I saw him at a party, right? And this was a party for a very specific kind of music. And generally you see people at these parties, you see them again and again over the course of years. There's some people I've seen at almost every party I've gone to, right? Then sometimes you'll see someone you haven't seen for years, they pop up again. I would definitely, I mean, unless he shaved, right? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't recognize him then. But there was this, to me, it felt like the algorithm, like maybe he has a different internet. Like we were obviously living in the same physical world to some level, but maybe the internet knows that there's something called Alex Jones, that there's something called this, there's something called that, da 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 da. And depending on how they've profiled people in terms of like what is best for managing their mind, what they get that as that is something completely different. Right. So this was like way back in like 2013 or 14. And I was really already starting to think of like, how many tiers to the internet are there? How many internets are there?
I mean, I think that just makes the most amount of sense.
And he was very concerned about climate change, and I thought it was bullshit. But we understood that the same conversation was happening about that. So that was the only one that had sort of bled over with the constant idea of what the idea was between the two, which I thought was interesting.
So I mean, we're taking a little bit of a turn right now towards technology, but if my memory's correct, and I'm pretty certain it is, when you go and we're all aware of the story or the history or whatever word you want to use, that the internet or DARPANet or ARPANet began as part of the military industrial complex, from the Pentagon. So if you scratch that surface a little bit deeper and you're like, okay, well, who are the people who are behind it? Or at least who are the people who they tell us are behind it? And you go and you like look at the actual names of the people. And then you go and you see like what their areas of expertise were. Like the guy who is credited with this idea of creating this decentralized computer network. Like that's kind of like how the internet is framed up, how it was decided. This dude was a PhD in behavioral sciences.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't a computer technology expert. He was a military behavioral scientist.
Yeah.
So if that's where this, supposedly began, and I don't think I mean, the way I understand the unfolding, like it goes back to like the 20s and the 30s and all of the work which Truth Stream Media, like, all the stuff they used to talk, like that's where like the thoughts were first put out. But like in the 60s, I think that's when ARPANET is credited. I think the guy's name is like Lick. I just remember Lick was his first syllable. That's what stuck. But I'm like, that's who was coming up with the ideas of what was being created. So if it's from the military, you can assume that it's weaponized from the beginning. And then secondly, if the guy's area of expertise is behavioral sciences, then how could this not be a behavioral tool weapon from the beginning? And what you're describing is just that.
So because I think there's another school of thought about where the internet comes from. And some people insist that the internet was invented at CERN, right? And then you go to what people say about CERN, that it's like creating Mandela effects, it's ripping holes in the fabric of space and time, right? So that would imply that just by giving somebody a different internet, you can give them a different reality, right?
So they're both. It's both of those things. CERN is credited with inventing the phrase the World Wide Web and HTTP.
Yes.
So the internet. So what started in the 60s was just purely hardware and infrastructure, and then once that was established, that's when the next layer came about. So it's really all of those. And then when you go in and you think like, well, why would you think CERN is any different than the Pentagon? Like it's all the same sort. So to me, like, I think that's a very dovetailed history or story, which is told to us. That's just like the next level of the user functionality.
Yeah. All right, let's do this. Let's take our break. I think in the second part, I would like to return to our conversation about greenery, like forests and the Amish country area, and like the idea of like green screen technology, because I've been having some thoughts lately, and some of what we've talked about here leads into where I want to go with that. And then also, as is required by our protocol here, I want to get into something about Indianapolis as well. So if you would like to join us for the second segment, you can go to patreon.com/offplanetmedia, projectkids.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. And for those of you who love Project Kids and would like more, we have 53 episodes of Playing the Glass Bead Game, which is 2 hours every week that Michael and I do, where we go deep into all of the kinds of things we touch on here in a similar kind of manner. I've been getting a lot of interesting comments on some of those shows lately. So if you guys haven't checked that out, they're there. If you'd like a complimentary episode, reach out to me. I'll make that happen for you. And you can have all of us all the time, as much as you want. Sounds really weird to me, but some people seem to like it. There's people out there that have watched every single thing you and I have ever done together, Michael.
I think they're called the CIA.
All right. We will see you guys on the other side. Be right back.